Right, that is SA Tourism CEO Themba Khumalo, acting CEO that is Themba Khumalo, speaking to us about that R1 billion deal that we found out from the media, particularly the Daily Maverick, just 2 days ago between SA Tourism and English Premiership club Tottenham Hotspur. A lot of South Africans reacting to say that it makes no sense. They should be reading the room to realize that we're a country with many problems and this money could be redirected to that. But Mr. Khumalo saying that SA Tourism is not about our electricity crisis, nor is it about the fact that we have a country that is riddled with potholes. He says there are departments that should be looking after that, and their constituency and their legal obligation as SA Tourism is to make sure that they drive people to visit South Africa and contribute to the GDP. All right, I'm going to discuss this further now. We do have in studio our sports editor, Vatangobeni. We also have in the UK, in fact, we have our UK correspondent, Ollie Barrett, who is outside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And I just want to start with you, Ollie, very quickly. I spoke to you yesterday, and you were saying that you already spoke to some of your sources that are close to Tottenham Hotspur who have confirmed that the deal has been signed. It has gone through and that there'll be an announcement soon, right? But I'm sure you heard the CEO, the acting CEO of SA Tourism saying that it's still at discussion stage. What exactly did your sources tell you? Because we're hearing something different now from the acting CEO.
No, this time yesterday we discussed that the deal was considered to be imminent, not signed. That's a very clear distinction there. The deal was considered by people close to the arrangement to be imminent in terms of announcement. We were not being told that anything had been signed. Certainly my sources close to the deal are still hopeful that it will indeed go through, although I can bring you one update. We were hoping and expecting indeed that there would be an event here at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this week, which would be when the deal was announced. Clearly, as we discussed yesterday, a lot of the timeline of all of this was thrown off by that leak to the media and then the controversy that followed it. Well, my understanding is that actually things are moving very quickly, and it may well be that the event to announce this deal, to confirm this deal at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, may well not happen this week after all. It may well have been postponed, and I think that reflects some of the comments that we were hearing in that briefing from Themba Khumalo just now. When he talked about the deal, as you say, not being signed, that was certainly what we were saying this time yesterday as well, but also saying that the deal still had to be approved by key stakeholders, including the tourism ministry. That does inject a little bit more uncertainty into all of this than many people around the deal necessarily knew was there, because, as I say, it was very much all systems go for an event to be organised at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this week to announce the deal. So a huge amount has changed since we spoke yesterday. But as I say, we were not reporting that the deal had been signed. We were reporting that the deal was very, very close indeed.
Yeah, and that the announcement was imminent. I do remember you telling us that, Ollie. And I'll come back to you. I just want to speak to our sports editor, Vatangobeni, who's in studio with me. Ollie saying that, you know, they were hoping that this deal, the announcement is imminent, etc. And now they're wondering if it's actually going to happen. But I want to speak to you, Bravi, particularly about the acting CEO's demeanour as he spoke about this or tried to clarify everything. I felt as though he was kind of shouting at South Africans to say, I mean, Ollie is saying that things are delayed, but he, you know, was saying right now that this deal is going to go ahead.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate, Maseko. I mean, you know, credit to him for apologizing, you know, when he came back onto the podium again. Unfortunately, the apology came too late. For him to scream at South Africans and shout at South Africans, you know, over anger about issues that are real. The lack of electricity is a real issue. The lack of water and our roads being riddled with potholes are real issues. Whether the money is allocated from which department, we as South Africans don't care about that. It's when we hear numbers as astronomical as the one that's being, you know, thrown around, that we get worried to say to ourselves, is our priority really tourism? Is our priority really being on the sleeve of a sporting team that's playing in a league, you know, 9,000 kilometers from us? Our priority is now getting our lights back on, making sure the economy gets back on its feet, making sure that no potholes, there's clean running water. We are seeing service delivery strikes everywhere. So for him, I think to belittle that and show absolutely no empathy to the real issues that are really, really, keeping our people back, for me, it left a very, very bad taste in my mouth.
In your mouth.
And unfortunately, what we actually meant to be celebrating something like this. We actually meant to be celebrating the fact that, we are putting South Africa again on the map on the international stage. But we are going to question how. We have to, as South Africans, question how. Because we've seen for far too long monies that are allocated for certain things, disappearing into the pockets of the tenderpreneurs and all sorts of people. So I think, Themba Khumalo, in his over-enthusiasm to explain this, and I think his irritation at the fact that this came out, it was leaked into the media. Unfortunately for him, he came across in a very demeaning and arrogant way, especially to us, the people of this country, whose tax money it is that actually goes to funding these initiatives.
And I just want to bring into the conversation, the team is telling me that we do have Mr. David Frost. He's the CEO of SA Tourism Services. And Mr. Frost, thank you very much for joining us here on ENC. I just want to go back to my colleague, our UK correspondent, Ollie Barrett, who is outside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Ollie, I wonder, I do remember, actually, thank you for that correction. I do remember you did say yesterday that you were being told that it's imminent, this deal from being signed. But Ollie, I wonder what the sentiment is in the UK. We've been told by the acting CEO that the UK is our biggest international market. Of course, we agree with the statistics, etc. But, the problems that South Africans are saying we have in the country, such as electricity and potholes, are enough to turn people away from visiting the country. And I wonder if you ever, just in conversations with people in the UK, do they still feel like South Africa is an appetizing country to visit with all the problems that we're facing?
Yeah, I think the numbers of Brits that still continue to come to South Africa prove that there is still an appetite for that journey, that holiday to be made or taken. Many Brits will, when they book a holiday, they'll do their research and they'll look into how their hotel or their tour party may deal with some of the issues, for example, around load shedding. When it comes to the UK audience for a deal like this, I think that it is absolutely the case that Rwanda has found a great deal of visibility from its deal with Arsenal. What is far less clear is exactly how quickly and how much that translate into actual tourism numbers. I mean, I happened to come here in a cab today with a Spurs fan. He was well aware of this deal. So in one sense, SA Tourism is already getting some bang for buck that it hasn't actually yet spent yet. But it was also interesting for me to hear in that press conference about whether a deal is still going to be signed. And as I say, things are moving very quickly at the moment. Is there an intention to sign a deal? Mr. Khumalo saying absolutely. So I think the intention from both sides is still to go ahead. But as I say, timeline's shifting, and events that we thought were going to happen this week in London, I'm now hearing may not do so.
Ollie, I just want to stay with you. You mentioned, the Visit Rwanda that we see on the T-shirts of a team such as Arsenal. I mean, I don't know. Here in South Africa, at least, Arsenal seems like a much bigger team than Tottenham Hotspur. So wouldn't it be more appealing maybe to try one of the bigger teams like your Man United, Man City or Arsenal itself, for instance?
Well, don't let anyone around here hear you say that. That would go down very badly indeed among Tottenham fans. But clearly at the moment it's the case that Arsenal are top of the table and Spurs very much are not. But with that comes further financial implications. If you're going to go for a Man United or a Man City or a club like Arsenal that's currently perched right at the top of the table, that's going to cost you potentially more than a club slightly further down the table. So I'm sure all of that will have been factored into these discussions. As I say, certainly here in Tottenham, they very much believe that they're the biggest club in London, but the facts don't always necessarily bear that out, and certainly at the moment Arsenal are very much in pole position in the league. And I just should also say that on Sunday, Man City are supposed to are coming here to play Tottenham in the Premier League. I think there was an expectation that this deal would be announced by then. That looks much less likely now.
All right, Ollie, let me bring in Mr. Frost, in fact, from, the South African Tourism Services. He's the CEO there. Mr. Frost, thank you very much for your time and thank you for joining us. The explanation that we've been given, of course, is that South Africa has about 500,000 visitors annually coming from the UK, and that this needs to grow, that this is a decision that will still go ahead. They will still sign this deal because they see the commercial, impact that it will have on South Africa, and that will be positive. Are you in agreement with this particular deal, or do you agree with those South Africans who feel as though South African tourism and the tourism department itself are not reading the room in terms of the problems we have in the country, and why this money is not redirected to those problems?
Yeah, good afternoon. Good to be with you. So let me at the outset just say that I think the last point is, I think those are red herrings. I think the problems that beset our country need to be dealt with through different budgets and different entities. Notwithstanding any problem that in fact any country has, there's an opportunity to market yourself to the world. And tourism is the most competitive economic sector on the planet. It's the only sector where we compete against every other country in the world. We've done quite a good job over the last 20 years. We think we could do infinitely better. And to me, the real issue here is this issue of working in isolation. So tourism is not like energy that is done by Eskom and it's purely a parastatal. The job of SA Tourism is to raise awareness and to present an appealing generic position. But SA Tourism does not transact. So people do not buy holidays from SA Tourism. That is purely a private sector preserve. The private sector transacts, and that's how we bring tourists here. As the private sector, which I represent on the inbound side, the spend that the private sector puts in is 10 to 20 times more than the budget of SA Tourism. And what we have historically been lamenting from our side is that SA Tourism does not consult us at inception so that we can plan together and execute together. I was disturbed that the CEO raised the thing and said that there's over 500,000 arrivals from the UK. Yeah. That is an incorrect figure. And it's appalling that the CEO of SAT doesn't use the correct figure. In 2019, we got 436,559 arrivals to be exact. In 2022, we got 283,000 arrivals. So we're 35% behind our pre-COVID levels within the UK. Australia outperforms us 2-1. They get 9 million overseas arrivals. We get a total of 2.6 million overseas arrivals. The reason they get 9 million with a far poorer product offering, they don't have the big five, they don't have our culture, they don't have our richness, is that they work together, the private sector and the public sector. We have been blindsided by this announcement. The CEO talks about meetings in August with stakeholders, and then he went on to talk about stakeholders. His stakeholders, you must listen to what he said. It's the Ministry of Tourism, Department of Tourism, Treasury, and the provinces. At no point did he mention the private sector. And this should be the learning that we take out of this. Somebody in the presidency needs to wake up and crack the whip. We need to work together. So we would question the 88 billion. I want to see the real interrogation of those figures. To us in the private sector, there is no return on investment about putting all your eggs into a Spurs basket in your biggest source market. The markets we need to focus on are around India and China. They are the biggest, fastest growing tourism markets in the world. At the moment, collectively, they only account for 6% of our arrivals. So as the Tourism Business Council, we've developed a very comprehensive and well thought out growth strategy that is predicated on growing emerging markets Because to grow your biggest source market and to try and get double-digit growth out of that is nigh impossible. So the opportunity lies elsewhere, and there is just unfortunately not a appetite to be doing this together. And somebody has got to crack that whip and actually try and do this, so we can have a structured engagement and we can bring a rational and very, very well thought through private sector perspective to this conversation.
All right, let me bring in sponsorships expert Stuart Masela, who's also just joined us now. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here for this discussion. I want to come back to you, Mr. Frost, very quickly. So you talk about the figures being incorrect, the 500,000 figures being incorrect, and the fact that you actually were not consulted as industry. But tell me, he says that this is something that's been happening for 20 years and South Africans just weren't aware. So basically almost just telling us that we should get over it. It's something that they've been doing for about 20 years. It's just that we didn't know. And somebody who just acted un-South African by exposing this and leaking it to the media. Is this something that's been happening for 20 years?
Well, look, I mean, SA Tourism spend their budget, but the point that I've just made, and without sort of trying to sound like a bit of a stuck record, is from a private sector point of view, we've been urging that we get included in that discussion early on, because we are also putting valuable resources into markets. But if we're not aligned and we cannot do this together, the sum total is suboptimal. And that's why I just go to that Aussie example. The Australians do this effortlessly and they see the results. We don't. And, by putting all your eggs into a basket like this, you can argue intuitively that there's a return on investment on anything. The case studies from Malta and Rwanda are not positive around growing leisure tourism volumes out of this. And then there's just this massive opportunity cost of not doing other stuff. So when we come and want to do tactical things or put things on the table, we're just going to be met with, oh, sorry, the money's been allocated and it's all in the Spurs deal. I'm also at pains to understand, because he referenced North America quite a lot as our second biggest source market. As we all know, soccer, they do have a national soccer team, but it's not the main, baseball, American football. These are the sports they watch. They don't watch Spurs in North America. So, quite frankly, we would need a lot of persuading. And once again, we need to see a proper interrogation of the purported return on investment. From a private sector point of view, I cannot fathom it.
All right. Well, let's go to Mr. Masela now. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Masela is a sponsorship expert. He actually was part of ABSA when the Springboks were also sponsored about 120 million rand at some point, Mr. Masela. So do you think that something like this will have great commercial outcomes for our country?
From a marketing and a perspective and a sponsorship perspective, for me, this is a great deal. For me, this is important. The proof will be in the rights that they provided and the activations that they're going to do. I remember when ABSA signed with the Premiership to do the ABSA Premiership all those years back, there was people saying it wasn't going to work, but ultimately it did work. Let's remember, it's an investment, and an investment never gives you immediate returns. You have to be, if someone says they're going to get immediate returns, then they're not telling the truth. I understand all the other issues people are talking about purely from a sponsorship and marketing perspective. This could be potentially a good deal for South Africa. If you think about it, Coca-Cola is the most well-known brand in the world, but Coca-Cola still spends money on advertising and marketing. So for Tourism South Africa, to market South Africa, it's very important. And we shouldn't look at this only from a British perspective, because the English Premier League is watched in China, in India, in the rest of Africa, in North America, in South America. So it truly is 188 countries watch the Barclays Premiership. So it's important that the audiences that you're going to get to are important. The trick would be how you get there and how do you put your message across to make sure that you get the bang for your buck.
So I suppose you also agree with the fact that he said, they have a legislative, responsibility as SA Tourism to promote South Africa and not necessarily to fix our potholes or our electricity crisis. That the Arts and Culture Department is there for that.
So I wouldn't have put it like that. All I would have said is that in any business, I think in any business, marketing is very important for any product to grow. And part of what we want to do is to put money into marketing. And it's important that even in times of crisis, you still put your marketing brand out there. And if we don't put the brand out there, then we're going to be overtaken by other brands, if we are not going to do marketing. So part of running a business is that there's going to be different areas from your production, from your marketing, from other areas that you need to look after. And I'm looking at it purely from the perspective to say, if we didn't have any other problems in South Africa, this was going to be a big deal in terms of getting us in front of the right audiences. And you just use one strategy to get through to different markets. You get through to China, because China, it's actually the biggest market that watches the Premiership. Over 300 million people 5 years ago were watching the Premiership from China. 149 million from India, 290 from the rest of the continent. So from a numbers perspective, but it also depends on what you want to do with it. Are you going to have criticism friendlies? What kind of content are you going to create to make sure that it aligns back to the sponsorship, not just putting the money just for Beijing, but you're going to use it purposefully.
All right. Well, I want to bring in my colleague, Vatango Beni. He is our sports editor, and he has, he has a little bit of a disagreement. I'll give you a chance to respond to him. And Bravi, I know that for you, it's also about why Tottenham, but also about the fact that we have a rugby cup during a World Cup year. I mean, a rugby club, a South African rugby club during a World Cup year that could actually also possibly give those commercial returns that SA Tourism is talking about.
Yeah, I think that the biggest bugbear for me, Maseko, and probably a lot of sports-loving South Africans, is that why Tottenham? You look at teams like Liverpool and Man United, they've got enough links in South Africa. And yes, Ollie did say it might cost you a little bit more because of the global appeal of these teams. Yeah. But then let's take it down to these markets that people, the steward spoke about. India, for example. We just hosted the Under-19 Cricket World Cup, the inaugural one, of which India won. Why didn't South African tourism think about sponsoring that or putting our logos on that? We just had a Hockey World Cup in India. South Africa was participating there. Why didn't we, again, sponsor that team? And these sponsorships are minimal. We're having an ICC T20 World Cup happening in our country next week, Women's World Cup. It speaks to the UK market, it speaks to the Australian market, it speaks to the Indian market. With the American team, the USA team playing cricket here with the 19s, you've got Formula E that's coming to Cape Town. Again, first time Formula E is coming onto the African continent. Big markets in China, big markets in the US, big markets in Europe, which are going to be following the Formula E. And then you've got the World Cup, Nepal World Cup coming to South Africa. Again, Australia are the big teams, and New Zealand and the UK. Those are the big teams. You want to attract those teams, right? Those audiences and those people on those LSMs. And then the big one for me, Maseko, which is just a no-brainer. You've got the Springboks, the reigning world champions. The Siya Kolisi story sells across all markets. Yeah. Rugby is growing very fast in the East. It's growing in America. Why aren't you, again, looking at the Springboks, wherever they play across the world, play to sold-out venues? We've got the Rugby World Cup happening later this year in France. Why aren't you looking at that team? And then the obvious one, again, it's a no-brainer. Football, women's football, is massive in the US. The US are going to host the next FIFA World Cup, right? Along with Canada and Mexico. But South Africa is bidding to host the next FIFA Women's World Cup in 2027. These are low-hanging fruits that involve South African sporting entities that have got global appeal and play in markets of which you want to attract those tourists to. So I'm saying to myself, I ask myself, why Tottenham? Why Tottenham? When you're sitting with so many other properties, and this is, again, which stakeholders were actually consulted when it comes to these deals and thinking about this kind of stuff? Because if you consult the right people, like the Stuart Maseras, who are in the sports sponsorship space, they will be able to tell you, you've got all these other properties that are being globally, and you've got these South African teams that play internationally and they've got global appeal. Why not look into them? You know, instead of taking all that money and throwing into one basket, which is Tottenham, which, again, have not won a European title. And if you look at the appeal of Tottenham as compared to Liverpool and Manchester United.
Yeah. So, but are you saying, those South Africans who are saying, why not Liverpool, why not Arsenal, and, you know, at least Man City or the teams that are in the top 3 of the English Premier League, then someone would respond and say, but are you saying if we gave the money to Arsenal, it would take the problems that South Africans are mentioning away, problems such as, you know, read the room, we have load shedding, we have potholes, we need to fix this country before you start giving money away? No,
I'm not saying that myself. All I'm saying is that, yes, you've got money, you've got to spend. As Stuart said, you've got to spend it towards marketing.
Yeah.
I fully get that. And yes, I'm empathetic to South Africa's situation at the moment. However, we've got to continue making sure that our tourism sector, which is one of the biggest contributors to GDP, it remains a focus. As I'm saying, there are other low-hanging fruit. There's other things that the money could have gone to instead of to one entity. And if you are going to go into the Premiership, there are other teams that are far bigger and better and, you know, have got a bigger global appeal and a bigger appeal within the South African sporting fraternity, you know, than the Tottenham. And that is where my issue is that why Tottenham? Why Tottenham? Yes, Man United, Liverpool will cost you a whole lot of money, and Man City. You know, however, I'm sure you can broker a deal with those teams. Benny McCarthy is at Man City. Man United.
Yeah.
You've got Quinton Fortune as an ambassador there. Gary Bailey's played for them. You've got Liverpool, which has got strong connections with South Africa. And there is no ways I think those teams would not have sat down with you, those entities, and said to you, okay, let's try and see where we can derive value, both of us, and still make sure that we keep South Africa's, you know, logo or whatever it is on our sleeve.
All right. Well, I will come back to that. This also just reminds me, I don't know, you know, let's go back to Mr. Masela. I just want you to respond to what Bravi just said in terms of the low-hanging fruits that are already there. The Rugby World Cup, the T20 World Cup that is coming here, you know, the Women's Football World Cup that is happening abroad. He's saying those are low-hanging fruits that SA Tourism could have actually used rather than this particular deal. Are you in agreement, or do you think those won't give us the type of money that the Tottenham Hotspur deal might?
I think it's a matter of strategy and ultimately choice. And I think there's as Vata clearly pointed out, is correct. There are many other opportunities that you can look at and try work best. The perspective that I'm coming from is that to have something like this, it helps you with your marketing. Even if it was going to the US national team and sponsoring the World Cup there, all I'm saying is that you've got a platform that's bigger, a platform that gets you to across a number of markets that you want to use. The important part is what is that you're getting. It shouldn't be just about Beijing. It shouldn't just be about South African logo on the sleeve of a shirt, but it's what comes with that. What kind of content do we create? And are we able to talk to people at the right time? And are people going to be listening to what we are saying? And lastly, because it's an investment, we shouldn't expect the return to come tomorrow. It should start trickling in, but it won't come tomorrow. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from, to say marketing, important. Marketing, very important. Platform, important. We can argue the teams, what they've won, what they've not won, but it's what you do with the property that makes it, that works for you at the end of the day. Because we've done a lot of sponsorship deals. For example, you know, MTN sponsors the Springboks. When the Springboks don't win, they don't lose. MTN. But when the Springbok wins, the sentimentality becomes much better. But it also means MTN needs to do some work around that. It's not just Beijing that can give you the return on investment. So the options, yes, are there. The options are there, Maseko. But I think at this particular time, and I'm not speaking on behalf of SA Tourism, at this particular time, that's what they saw the deal is important for them.
All right. I think maybe let's find out from my colleague Ollie Barrett. He's actually outside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium where the announcement was supposed to possibly be made sometime today or this week about this deal being signed. Ollie, I wonder if your sources are telling you exactly what this deal, what the nitty-gritties are of this deal. For instance, this 1.2 billion, or this 1 billion rather, what is it going to get us? Is it just the flag? And for how long will Tottenham have this flag on their jerseys? Is it a 3-year deal? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, my understanding is that the deal was in the shape of a 3-year arrangement. It was going to, and I possibly shouldn't yet talk in the past tense, it was or is going to include that logo on the sleeve of Tottenham Hotspur. It will also include branding on match days. The idea behind that is that the television cameras all around the world will pick up some of those things like advertising on hoardings around the pitch, that type of thing, engagement in Tottenham Hotspur social media channels. It's all that kind of thing which would be rolled into this deal, as I say, lasting its intended around 3 years, in the region of £42 million. So that is indeed what has been reported elsewhere, not far off R1 billion. And therefore the idea is that South Africa gets a huge amount of exposure there for its tourism offering. Now, some of your other guests have been talking about other sporting competitions, and indeed the audiences here in the UK, but also in places like the United States. Certainly those close to the deal would say, and have been saying to me in recent days, that the Premier League is just a completely different kettle of fish than any of those other sporting events that you've been talking about. The audiences are of a completely different scale, but crucially, worldwide. This is not just about the UK audience, this is about markets in China, markets in India, markets in the United States, as some of your other guests have been mentioning. The US market for the Premier League is absolutely exploding. The television deal in the United States for the Premier League has just been ramped up by many, many millions of dollars because of that growth in audience in the United States. So certainly from the perspective of the people that have been working on this deal, they feel that that's why it delivers for South Africa. But clearly it's a huge sum of money, and it's very difficult before a deal like this to prove exactly the benefits that are going to flow to South Africa, exactly how many people will that get on aeroplanes coming into South Africa from parts of Asia, from the United States, from elsewhere.
All right, Ollie, let me give Mr. Frost just the last word very quickly, Mr. Frost. This reminds us of how South Africans reacted to that flag from the Arts and Culture Department. And of course, it was quite interesting when the acting CEO, Themba Khumalo, then said that, if you want to bring in anything about which sporting code should be sponsored here in South Africa, that is something that comes from the budget of the Arts and Culture Department and not necessarily ours. Is this how you would have put it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think when I've been listening to a lot of the discussion from your sort of panelists, but from my point of view, when you sit back and look at this, and you look at a market like the UK, South Africa does not suffer from a lack of awareness. I mean, we are well known as an international tourism destination. What we suffer from is we have a very low conversion rate because we have impediments. A lot of them are self-inflicted. We had unabridged birth certificates. We've got perceptions of safety and security. There are load shedding, potholes, etc. So all of these are issues that take us from a high level of awareness to a low level of conversion.
Yeah.
And I just come back to it as I cannot fathom that doing a deal with Spurs, and I'm not negating or whatever. I know that there's a big global reach and all of that. This, and I'm saying this from a private sector point of view, we do not see that this is going to have people stampeding into the travel agencies in high streets to book holidays to South Africa. Well, it just will not. And there are far more effective partnership approaches to using our scarce resources, to putting them together, and to bringing back what we need. We need to bring back the solid mid-market out of the UK. That's the market that got spooked in COVID, and that's the market that we need to resuscitate. And we need a proper targeted campaign that will deliver that. And I don't see the Spurs deal doing that in any shape or form.
All right. Well, thank you very much to all of you gentlemen for this discussion today. A lot of people thinking different things. I think for the ordinary South African, this whole thing is about how people will continue to visit a country where there's an electricity crisis, potholes and rampant crime. I guess South Africans are just not being able to reconcile with that. But that's it with the discussion. Thank you very much to all of you for speaking to us. It was Stuart Masela. He's the former ABSA sponsorship manager. We had David Frost, the SA Tourism Services CEO, our correspondent in the UK, Ollie Barrett, and of course, our ENCA sports editor, Vata Ngobeni.